Hello. My name is Robert Davidian. I'm an Armenian American, and I speak only English. I don't speak Armenian, but I've been to Armenia 20 plus times in the past 20 plus years, and I know I've learned a lot about Armenia by going there, and I think that typical Armenian Americans don't know a lot about Armenia, especially if you don't speak Armenian. And so here we are to talk about the current situation in Armenia. And I could tell you about myself. The reason I went back and forth to Armenia was to work for different organizations, but also to do documentary films about corruption and election fraud in Armenia, which was shocking to me that it was not fake news, it was real. And people were living under those circumstances, and it's not a democracy with that. But there was some hope in 2018, but let's see. We'll talk about what happened since then. And I'm sitting right now on Zoom with Coco Yegnukian, and Coco also is he's born in Armenia, but from New York like me. And Coco, what can you say about the current situation and also the National Democratic Alliance?
Thanks, Robert. Yeah, I was born in Armenia. My family left when I was 4, when it was still Soviet Armenia, and I've been in the US now for 50 years. So one of the early emigres. Well, what's going on now? The last 2 years have proven to be catastrophic, is even a mild word, for Armenians worldwide. We all know what happened. We all know about the war. We can talk ad infinitum about what the causes were. The question now, I think, is how to get out of this situation, recover, rebuild, and start from at least where we were from prior to the war, where we were trying to get into becoming a more civil society, because everything, I mean, the biggest, of course, loss was the thousands and thousands of young men that were killed, and even more, double the amount that have been left maimed. And that's not even to mention the psychological trauma that has grown exponentially from those young men. Their relatives, their workmates, their children, their wives and girlfriends, and so on and so forth. So it's essentially the entire nation that is in this situation. Regarding the National Democratic Alliance, unfortunately, and I say this with the utmost sincerity, unfortunately, they are the only political force right now that is not corrupt, that is now somehow tied to what they like to say in Armenia, the Nakhkins or the Nergaz, the formers or the currents, the formers being Levon, Kocharian, and Sarkisian, and the current being the Pashinyan regime. They're the only ones that are not tied. They're the only ones that are talking about the reunification of Artsakh with Mother Armenia. They're the only ones that are talking about completely tearing up the November 9th announcement, and that's all it is an announcement. It's not a treaty. It's not, it was a ceasefire announcement.
Let's just say what it was. It was a ceasefire announcement brokered by Vladimir Putin.
Written by Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm.
When he was asked, don't you want to read it? He said, why should I read it? I wrote it. That's on camera.
Okay. And it was to try to put an end to the killing of the war in 2020 between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
So going back to that, yes. And also the National Democratic Alliance is the only political force that is striving and talking about getting deoccupied from Moscow. We are under occupation. The occupation, ironically, today is December 2nd. It's the 102nd anniversary of the day that the Bolshevik Red Army entered Armenia and occupied Armenia in 1920. Just like we were occupied then, we were still occupied. The 1991 independence was just a de jure independence. De facto, we are completely under the yoke of Moscow.
And a lot of people might say that, oh, well, that's good because it's a big, strong country and they can protect us.
Of course. I think people have said that for decades, but I think the last 9 months have proven otherwise, thanks to Ukraine. Little tiny Ukraine, by the way, if we were going to put an analogy, Ukraine is much weaker compared to Russia than Armenia is compared to Azerbaijan. Yet, not only have they fought for 9 months, they are gaining in 9 months. Russia is falling apart. I know people who have outright said, Coco, I was a Russophile. I bet my money on Russia, but it goes no longer. I think it's no secret anymore. It's also no secret not only that they are not the superpower that they claim to be. It was smoke and mirrors. They have also proven that they are not an ally. They've been proving it for years, for decades. They've been their worst PR manager. All we have to do is open our eyes and see. But the thing that won over the most critical Armenian that was still pro-Russian was the September 13th attack. The 13-14, the two-day war, if you will. Because that was the first time that they were on, quote-unquote, Soviet Armenian territory, the 29,800 that Nico likes to talk about so much. Until then, they were saying it was in Artsakh, it was disputed territory, it was the 7 territories surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh, but the September 13th was a direct attack on sovereign Armenian land that is what is now considered the Republic of Armenia, and Russia still didn't lift a finger. It's
and by the way, Russia has an organization a little bit like NATO. It's called CSTO, and Armenia belongs to that. And if any country is attacked in that organization, supposedly they should be defended by Russia and other countries militarily.
Absolutely.
But Armenia was attacked in September of this year, and Armenia requested defense, and it did not happen. Russia is not helping.
Yeah, not only did not happen, they sent a fact-finding mission. And I suppose they're still looking for facts. I don't know what they're looking for. Last week, there was I guess the General Assembly was in Yerevan. And of course, Nikol said big words that he usually does, and this is unacceptable. But all he has to do is cease his membership. And by the way, I've heard a lot of people say, well, maybe it's not so easy to leave. It is. It's easier to leave the CSTO than it is to leave a gym membership at Equinox. If you are leaving whimsically, just because you don't want to, whatever, yes, in that case, there is a process. You have to submit a letter. I think there's a 30 or 45-day waiting period. However, if you are leaving because the CSTO has not fulfilled its obligations, which it most clearly hasn't, it can be done within minutes. It's 2.5 months. So even if there was the time, if we had started September 14th, assuming that we did need a period, it still isn't done. It's yet another smoke and mirrors that Nikol has put in the people's faces by saying, yeah, we're going to leave. There were words like he slapped Putin's across the face with his words. He hasn't done anything. It's just like since 2018, when he was arresting Kocharyan, releasing Kocharyan, arresting Sarkisyan, releasing Sarkisyan. And his favorite word, I'm going to lay him down on the asphalt. Not one single of those prior corrupt criminal oligarchs are in prison today. They're all released. Many of them are abroad with their stolen money taken along with them.
Yeah, I want to point out that those people you mentioned, Kocharyan and Sarkisyan, I mean, for the Armenian Americans who do not even know, these are people that stole the election and were president of Armenia for 20 years, and stole the money, billions of dollars estimated, and are still free. Still free.
Not only are they free, the very, Nicole came to power with the slogan, Mergir Sergin, reject Serge. However, Serge's cronies and Kocharyan cronies are the supposed opposition in the parliament. So the parliament consists of three groups: the Kocharyans, the Sarkissians, and the Pashinyans. And Pashinyan is just an extension of Levon Ter-Patrosyan. So even though we pretend that there's been four different regimes, it's all the same one. And the common denominator they all have is they all serve Moscow. They all serve Moscow's interest. And when need be, Moscow sends its agents just to keep things in check, just like it did with Karen Karapetyan, who was prime minister while Serge was still president. And now they sent over another, excuse my language, but there's no other word for him, this other scumbag, Ruben Vartanyan, who is outwardly known as Putin's money guy. He was his money launderer. And now there's rumors that he's actually involved in the mining. But most importantly, he's become a state minister at Artsakh. He put on this big show how he renounced his Russian citizenship and moved to Artsakh. And what is his interest? His interest is to convince the people that Artsakh can never be part of Armenia. Rather, Artsakh needs to be part of the Russian Federation. And of course, we have fools that believe him. It's just unbelievable. He's even gone far to say, let's assume Artsakh is truly an independent nation, which is not. He even went as far as to say that Armenia should join the Russian Federation. He got a nickname as Tatar Rubo because he said, well, of course, it's not what I would want, but if we were to go into the Russian Federation, we should at least have the stature of Tataristan, which compared to the other quote-unquote autonomous republics is slightly better. And he gained the name Tatar Rubo. So he is specifically placed there to sway, convince, threaten the people that we should not be independent. And this is what's happening. And the National Democratic Alliance, is the only one that is bringing this to light. It's not to say that there aren't individuals. There are very strong individuals. There are great thinkers. There are people out there. But as far as, that's why I specified an actual organized political force, an entity, a movement that is constantly striving for those three things: the deoccupation from Moscow, the reunification with Artsakh, and shredding to pieces the November 9th statement. So we can start. And then, of course, from there, it leads into actualizing Wilsonian Armenia.
What about further past that, becoming closer to Europe and those kind of things?
Of course, yeah, because right now, all the four regimes that we mentioned, they've been completely towards Russia. National Democratic Alliance and some supporters, individuals, believe that our future lies in the West. That is to say, mainly Europe, and the main country is France, and then of course the US. And of course, there's naysayers that, US has its own dirty laundry and this and that. Yes, of course. No one is saying that the United States is an angel or France is an angel. However, unlike Russia, the US's interests are in line with Armenia's interests. Russia's interests are in direct opposition to Armenia's interests. And they have always been. Through the last 30 years of since the Soviet Union collapsed, during the Soviet Union, and another 200 years during Tsarist Russia. Their interest has always been against us. Their interest lies with Turkey, believe it or not, even though they are competitors. But when it comes to the case of Armenia, they actually work together. They did that in 1918. What they do is they sicked the Turks on us, and then they jumped in to mediate, to stop things and say, well, you'll have this little piece of land. Agree to this, at least you'll have this much, otherwise you'll have nothing. Not that different than what happened in 2020. Deal with this little bit, and they come in as saviors. They're doing the same thing, and our people are falling for that again. Thankfully now, the Turks, Azerbaijanis are one and the same. They got so greedy that they made it quite apparent that they are working with Russia. And most of the people realize this. The only thing remaining is for the people to get out and go into the streets. Because the government, in order for the West to directly help, there's only two ways. They can either work intergovernmentally with the Armenian government, which we know they can't, because Pashinyan is nothing but a vassal, or they have to see people on the ground. And they have to see tens of thousands. Not like in 2018, when it was 150 or 200,000. A few dozen thousand would work. 20, 30,000 would be enough for America to step in. In September, Nancy Pelosi, along with the delegation of Frank Pallone, Jackie Spear, and Anna Eshoo, visited. And they clearly stated, they said, what do you want from us? And they put on a whole show, didn't say anything. When they returned, Jackie Spear went on record saying, we are ready to help Armenia, but we cannot so long as they are a member of CSTO, because that would be a direct violation. So they're spelling it out for us. They've been trying to say it in a soft manner, because the US government versus the Russian government is far more diplomatic and far more sensitive. But they realize that these idiots in Armenia don't understand or don't want to understand, so they had to spell it out to them like second graders. They said, leave those bastards and we will help you in every possible way, economically, militarily, and so forth. And they've yet to do so.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi was there in September. She made that very clear. She said, we are ready to help. And it was all over the news, and nothing has happened since then.
And she made 3 visits. It's very interesting. In May, she visited Ukraine. In August, Taiwan. And in September, Armenia. Yeah. It is not a coincidence that these are the 3 countries threatened by Nouveau Bolshevism. And those are the 3 countries that she visited. Those are the 3 nations that are on the threshold to a new world of democracy. Because if Ukraine, Taiwan, and Armenia are saved, all the other nations will also rise. Right now, Ukraine is the one fighting in the trenches, literally. But we have to realize that Ukraine is fighting the war, whether they like it or not, for the free world, not only for themselves. Because once Russia collapses, Turkey will follow suit. Turkey is also on the brink of collapse. They have their own share of headaches, of course, with the Kurds and so forth. They are on the verge. What we as Armenians need to do is we need to wake up and see, what side are we going? Are we still holding on to the dried up umbilical cord of Putin, where we see that it's a sinking ship? They have nowhere to go. They are a dying animal. That's what Putin's regime is. Or are we going to the West that is democratic, is prosperous, respects human rights, and so on and so forth? Once again, I'm not painting them to be angels, but when you compare the West to the East, it's not even in the same ballpark.
Coco, can we talk a little bit about the actual people, the heads of the organization? National Democratic Alliance?
Sure. Thank you for asking that, Robert. So it consists of a council. The council currently has 8 members. There is not one head. They are all equal. And unlike communist-style organizations, where it's one head and they all hold up their card and vote yes, and it surrounds usually around one entity, which is what an autocratic regime does, whether it's Pashinyan or Putin or Erdogan or Aliyev. This is around the ideology. And the ideology were the things that I mentioned earlier: the reunification with Artsakh, the occupation, getting rid of November 9th, and striving towards the Wilsonian Armenia, which is, by the way, our historical and legal right. The heads, the people in the council are Girar Sefilyan, war hero from the first Artsakh war that you mentioned in the 90s. He was greatly responsible for the liberation of Shushi. And then he had gone into the political end of society in the last 20 years. There's also an important person that I need to mention, who is Varujan Avedisyan. Varujan Avedisyan has been an activist, intelligentsia. I mean, you can call him so many things. I don't want to sit here and brag about him, but most notably, he was imprisoned during pretrial detention under Sergic's regime. He was released when Pashinyan came in, released on bail, but then convicted and put back into prison on May 28th, 2022, 6 a.m. in the morning, our Independence Day. Varujan suffers from an interesting illness that to this day has not been determined. There's theories that he may have been poisoned, which is nothing to put past Putin. As we know, Putin has taken out opposition leaders in London, in Moscow, even on the streets in front of Kremlin. We remember when Nemtsov was shot in broad daylight.
Yes.
So we can't put it past them. But putting that aside, what happens with him, essentially he goes into septic shock. What the causes are, no one knows. Armenia does not have the medical facility nor the professionals to determine that. He has to be taken abroad because that's where they have the apparatus to determine that. The 3 incidents that he had, which led him to practically into a coma, he was rushed to the hospital unconscious. Thankfully, through the hard work of Armenian doctors, he was revived after getting resuscitation, dialysis, and other measures that are just at the critical end of reviving him. But right now, while he's in Nubarashen prison, if that was to escalate, he would not be able to, those minutes would make a difference. He would not be able to reach the hospital in time. There are only 2 hospitals in all of Armenia that can possibly bring him out of that situation. One is the Erebuni Hospital and one is Arabkir. And all we are asking right now, we are not even asking for his release, even though he should be. We're just saying, let him be under those hospital conditions. So when his situation gets to that critical point, they can immediately work on him. The one thing that he does have, he has, I guess you would call it pre-symptoms of when that critical stage would happen. And the pre-symptoms are a few things. The most outward one is uncontrollable shivering and cold when everyone around him, his cellmate, for example, is fine. This has been going on now for about 2 weeks. So when that pre-symptom, I don't know if I'm using the correct word, could escalate to the critical moment, could be any time. In the past, it's been days, sometimes it's been weeks, those 3 other incidents I've been talking about. And the only thing they've done, just to show that they're doing something, because his attorney, Araik Papikyan, has written letters to the prosecution, the justice minister, as well as the human rights ombudsman. And last week he was taken to the hospital, and they checked his temperature. They took his blood pressure, and they did a couple of blood analysis. They said everything's fine, and then they sent him back, just to say that they've done something. This is also reminiscent of what happened in 2017 with Artur Sarkisyan, which many of the Armenians know as Hatzberov, the bread bringer. He was slowly killed in prison. And this is what they're doing to Varujan. This is their ideal situation, because they say, well, he died.
Can you talk about a couple of other members besides Varujan?
There's also Vaye Giray Sefilyan I mentioned. There's Vaye Gasparyan, who was a surgeon until he became more active, and of course lost his job because of his activities. There's Garegin Chugazesyan, who's one of the foremost IT specialists in Armenia, among other things. There's Armena Gurerian, who's the father of the Gurerian brothers who were involved in the Sasna Tsrer rebellion of 2016. Yerishe Bedrosyan, who's a musician, but has been in civil active life for over a decade. Artur Ayvazyan, who by profession is an attorney. There's, of course, Ara Papian, which many of us know, diplomat, former ambassador to Canada, and of course the foremost scholar on Wilsonian Armenia. And he has proven over and over again that it's not just a fable, it is something actual. And then my brother, Garo Yerlukyan, who's a businessman and attorney, also who left Armenia in 1971 with me and my family. He returned with his wife and 5 children in 2009 and has been there since. And I'm sure the public knows a bit about him.
Okay, well, that's a good roundup about the situation and the organization. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I see we're running out of time, so we'll wrap it up. I don't think I left anybody out. So one of the ways that the KGB works is to cause confusion, which is what they're doing. And I know it's extremely difficult, even if you are Armenian speaking and you read Armenian, because there's so much nonsense thrown at you that it just gets confusing as hell. So I just ask of the public, whether it's the diaspora or our brothers and sisters back home, to focus on what are the important issues. To me, it was those aforementioned ones. If you believe that Artsakh should be reunified with Mother Armenia, see who is talking about that. If you believe that we are under the yoke of Moscow and we should be free, we should be deoccupied, see who is talking about that and working towards that. If you believe that the November 9th agreement should be shred to pieces, see who's talking about that. Because there are organizations that say, oh, the November 9th agreement is horrible, but well, it's already signed. What can we do? Get rid of it. It's quite simple. That's all I ask. Follow the news, see who it is. Of course, I'm going to say National Democratic Alliance. If you're not familiar with them, they do have a Facebook page, they have a website, they have a YouTube channel. Listen to their interviews. They're in the streets right now. There's a daily sit-in for to get Varujan Avedisyan to the proper medical facility. They also often have rallies in the center of Yerevan at Freedom Square, also known as the Opera House. So they're out there. Of course, there's a blockade against them from any national television or national radio. So they're limited to their own YouTube channel and so forth. But they can be found. Listen to them, make up your own minds, and see how you can assist in going forward. We do need, the ultimate way is for people to be on the ground. Because if people are on the ground, then the Jackie Spears and Pelosi's can say, oh, you know what? Nicole is not working with us, but here we have 20, 30,000 people that realize that they need to accept the hand that is extended to them by the US. And then they can somehow jump in.
You mean on the ground in Armenia only, or on the ground here also?
Well, on the ground in Armenia is the main one. And of course, we have demonstrations over here just to show that the diaspora, because right now, unfortunately, 99%, if not, I'm just saying not 100, even though it's 100% of the diaspora and organizations are involved in cultural issues or rebuilding a kindergarten in some village in Armenia, which is all well and good. But it's like adding an extension to your house without building a foundation. It can't be done.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks a lot for talking and giving a great background about what's going on right now and what we can do in the future to stay informed. Check out the Facebook page, National Democratic Alliance.
Thank you, Robert. And maybe we can have some of these meetings in the future again.
Let's do it again.
Okay. Have a good evening.